If you were my daughter, I would never let you see him again. And if you do not stop seeing him, he is going to kill you. Friend came into the bathroom. She handed me a cup. I looked inside of it and it had like crushed up pills. And she was like, here, drink this. I was like, what are you doing? And he said, a demon is telling me to kill you. I went to call my mom and I said, hey, I have something to tell you. And she was like, let me guess, you're pregnant. And I was like, yeah, I am. And so I go to the Bible, I flip to the back index, I look up the word homosexuality, and I go and I read all of the verses. I walked into that coffee shop dead, and I walked out alive. As far back as I can remember, I craved drama. Not because I wanted to hurt people or harm them, but I just wanted to get reactions out of people. I loved it. I craved seeing how people would react to things. For example, when I was in the 3rd grade, I wrote death threats to all of my friends. I put it on my Pooh Bear paper and I put each letter in one of their cubbies. And when we were coming back from recess or lunch, whatever it was, they all found the letters and they were so distraught. You know, understandably so, right? You just get this death threat and you have no idea who it's from. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. They don't know that I did it. No amount of consequences was going to take away the reward that I felt from seeing their reaction. That pretty much summarized who I was. As far back as I can remember being a young girl, 1st, 2nd grade, I was already stealing, lying, cheating. I had extremely low morals. I did not care what was right or wrong. I was going to do what pleased me. I couldn't learn from my mistakes because I never thought that I was in the wrong. People would tell me all of the time, this is the way that your life is headed. You need to change the trajectory of your life, or this is what you're going to become. You're going to become a statistic. And they could have been talking to a brick wall. I was so hollow. I remembered them saying all of these things and not caring a single bit. People would ask me all of the time, how did you get this way? Was there some major event in your life that, you just started to rebel? And honestly, no, I cannot remember a single instance in my life where I can look back and be like, oh, that's why. It was just who I was. It was, my life is an illustration of sin nature. We come into the world bent towards sin, and that shows up differently in everybody's life. And it just happened to show up in my life through rebellion and selfishness and just a complete disregard for consequences. For the first 19 years of my life, I was headed towards a very tragic ending. I did not have enough wisdom to see it at the time. But thankfully, Jesus showed up into my life and completely changed it. And the good news is that he doesn't just come into your life and make you a better person. He gives you a new life and transforms you from the inside out. What no amount of consequences would ever do, Jesus redeemed in me. He stepped inside my life and changed everything. This is my story. I am one of 6 children from the same mom and dad. I have 2 older brothers, and I am the oldest of 4 girls. When I was growing up, I remember my parents got baptized, and I'm pretty sure it was after that we started going to church. I did not want to be there, and so I would do really, again, crazy things for the attention. I would write "go to hell" on the whiteboards. I remember stealing money from the offering plate. I probably humiliated my parents beyond anything I could possibly understand. I never doubted that God existed, that he was real. I actually remember a time my mom sent me to a camp for troubled kids one year. And while we were there was like this conversation happening in the group, and I was just kind of on the side making like these mud balls for whatever reason. And I was just like listening to the conversation, but I wasn't a part of it. One of the kids, they were just talking about God and whatever. And I just remember him saying, if God exists, let him strike me now. And I immediately threw the dirt ball at him. And I was like, well, there you go. He exists and you just got struck. So I didn't struggle with the idea that God was real. But I do think that believing God is real and then living according to his word are two completely different things, as I would come to find out. Even though we did go to church, I do not remember like a super religious upbringing by any means. I went to daycare, I went to public school, I watched secular TV. And that is my own perspective. If my mom or any of my other siblings had a different perspective and told the story differently, I think that what stands out to me is that the world clearly had a much stronger hold and influence on my life. Even if we did do more as a family that I just don't recall, I think that I was already bent towards sin and secularism and worldliness, that those things probably just don't stand out because I was so uninterested. Even going to church, it wasn't transforming my heart because I, at the time, clearly didn't have a desire to actually follow God myself. However, I do realize, looking back, how God's hand was always over my life. I recall this instance where I was riding my bike in my neighborhood. I was going to a friend's house. As I'm riding, I see this man in a white truck pass by me, and something in my soul just like freaked out. He seemed so creepy and weird, and he stared at me, and I just felt like that was just so strange. And so I'm riding and he passes by, and something inside me is like, turn around and look. So I do, I turn around and I look, and he had gotten up to a place where he could turn around, and he was turning around. And I just was like, I remember pedaling so fast. I was like terrified. I was like, why is this man turning around? And I turned the corner, and her house was right there. I jump off of my bike and I go and I knock on her door, and she doesn't answer. Nobody is home. And I felt hide, just like I needed to hide. Her front porch was covered in bushes, so you couldn't see through them. And I just remember bending down and peeking through them, and his truck is coming around the corner, and he's coming around slowly, and he sees my bike, and he's passing by her house at a slow speed. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my gosh, what in the world is happening? He ends up, after a few seconds, taking off. I go back out, get on my bike, and head home after he is clear. And I just remember feeling so terrified. I went home and I told my mom, and it was such a supernatural experience because I felt prompted by something. I felt prompted to turn around. I felt prompted to hide. And so looking back, I totally realized that God was always looking out for me and guiding me. But other than that, I grew up in a really loving and supportive home. My mom and dad both loved all of us children so much. They tried to do everything they could to love us and support us. I know that my mom tried her hardest to help me. As I got into middle school, I was super disruptive as a kid in school. I had no desire to learn. I had no desire to even be at school. I only went because I had to, and therefore I caused so much trouble for the other students and the teachers in my schools. As young as I can remember, in middle school, 6th grade, I was suspended more times than I can count. And I went to ISS, which was in school suspension. So I was suspended from actually attending class, but I would go to this other building where I would have to sit in a cubicle all day long, and then I would just do the work that the teachers had in class that day. But I got no teacher instruction. I fell asleep all of the time sitting in there because I was so bored. I, dated boys, fought with the girls, had a terrible temper, and absolutely zero self-control. I remember my dad was such a hard worker. My dad is trying to provide for these 6 children. He built us a home in Texas, this big, beautiful home. What started out as like reactions for like when I would create drama and get reactions out of people, it turned into something way uglier. And because my dad worked a lot and he was gone and my mom was with us most of the time, I just took out so much anger and aggression out on her. I took all of my frustration out on her, and she became like my living punching bag. One of my stays in the juvenile detention center is what they called it in Texas. I'm just going to refer to it as juvie. One of the times I had to go to juvie was because I attacked my mom and I physically assaulted her. I scratched up her arm. I drew blood, and they're like taking me away, and I'm like calling her names as though it was like her fault that I was going to juvie, that I attacked her. Another time that stands out to me is I would like write I hate you letters, and then I would slide them under her door and give them to her and think it was like the funniest thing in the world. She drank coffee all of the time. That's where I probably get my coffee, my love of coffee from. But she drank coffee all of the time. And she had it's like a little sugar dish right next to her coffee pot. And I remember going in and pouring salt into the sugar dish, and she put it in her coffee. And she was like, oh my gosh, who did that? And a family friend happened to be over, and he ratted me out. And so I got caught. But I thought it was so funny. I thought it was the funniest thing to hurt my mom and cause all of that pain and heartache for her. And being a mom now, it like really does break my heart because I can't imagine one of my children behaving like that towards me. And to know like that is how I treated my mom, and she always was there for me every step of the way throughout some of the most tragic times in my life that were to come. It really is just such a tragedy that I behaved that way towards her. It was around the 6th grade that I realized that I was attracted to girls, and I was 12 years old when I entered into a relationship with another girl at school. That relationship would become one of the major sources of conflict in my life up to high school. My mom didn't know what to do. I'm already this super rebellious child who doesn't listen to anything, doesn't respond to consequences. And now I'm telling her that I'm, gay, that I'm a lesbian in this homosexual relationship. I think she was trying to do the best that she could, but she essentially like isolated me and told me that I could not hang out with any of my friends anymore. I basically went to school and came home and lived in my room. And because of that, I started sneaking out of the house. I would run away. I would get on to phones and computers after everybody went to bed. And I ended up in the juvenile detention center multiple times in that period of time in my life. One time, my girlfriend ran away, and she came and stayed under my bed in my room. And I was hiding her in my room, and the cops and her mom were looking for her for days, and they couldn't find her. The police had come over during the day, and I'm like, I don't know where she is. And so they left. Well, they ended up coming back in the middle of the night, and I heard them knocking on the door, and I knew it was them. And so I took her and I put her in my little sister's room in the closet, and we put like stuffed animals over her. I told my sister, don't say anything. They came in with their flashlights, and they didn't find her. And so they left. I brought her back into my room, and for the next few days, like she just lived in my room under my bed. We ended up getting caught somehow. That was a really crazy experience. I'm going to refer to God throughout my story because now being a Christian, looking back, I can see how God was in my story throughout my entire life. And when I got into that homosexual relationship, it was one of the first times that I felt like an actual conviction. And I felt like I needed to look up in the Bible homosexuality. And so I go to the Bible, I flip to the back index, I look up the word homosexuality, and I go and I read all of the verses. And I'm like, wow, that sounds really bad. But it was not enough to make me change. I continued that relationship. I was sexually active in it. I was going to do whatever I wanted, and I would fight anyone who got in my way. So meanwhile, the rest of my life is like spiraling out of control too. Because of all of the runaways and the charges going to juvie, everything that was accumulating at that time from the criminal activity that I was doing, fighting my mom, I had to go to court all of the time. And I ended up having to do like anger management classes, community service. Finally, the judge court ordered me to go to the academy. The academy was a military style corrections facility for like troubled teens, and you could get court ordered to stay there, and you would have to fulfill a 6-month program. But it also had a school where if you got like expelled from public school, a judge could send you there to do school, but you would go home and afterwards. And so I got court ordered to do the 6-month stay. So I had to live there for 6 months and go through this whole like military style program. And I will say the academy was the first experience where I was like forced to obey. Like I had to listen to them. The nature of the school did not allow me to rebel. And for the first time in my life, I was like following rules. I was getting my schoolwork done. I had to do really productive things with my time, but none of it was actually like changing who I was. It was merely about survival. I knew I had to do what they said. And so I was doing that. And I think on the surface, that behavior modification looked like I may have been getting better. But on the inside, because I knew it wasn't actually changing my nature, changing who I was, it was all just like a Band-Aid. Because the moment I got out, all of my same patterns emerged. They resurfaced. I was right back to doing all of the same things. Being disrespectful to my mother, running away, getting in trouble. I skipped school and went with a friend to go shopping one day. And we decided that it would be such a great idea to steal whatever we wanted. And so we went from store to store and we just stole all sorts of stuff until we finally got caught at Kohl's where we were stealing. And mind you, I was fresh out of the academy. Like I want to say this was within weeks of getting out. And I found myself right back in the back of a police car getting taken to juvie once more. I remember calling my mom and being like, hey, do you have those clothes that I stole? Because Kohl's only took back the clothes that were from their store. They didn't take all of the other clothes. And I'm like, hey, do you have all of those clothes that I stole? And she was like, yeah, but I sold them all on eBay. And I remember being so livid. Like I was like, how dare you sell all of the clothes that I worked so hard to steal? I was so furious that my mother sold the stolen clothes. Like that's how twisted my thinking was at the time. That's how I thought. So eventually I end up getting out again. And this time I run away. I run away to go be with my girlfriend. While I was in the academy, my parents moved about 30 minutes away from the city that I grew up in. So I rarely got to see my girlfriend anymore. So we made this whole plan of running away. I was gone for about 2 weeks, and I was introduced to a guy who introduced me to drugs, and this is where I started abusing drugs. I remember eventually calling my mom and letting her know that I was safe, because it had been quite a while. It was a long time. And she heard the train in the background, and she knew the area I was in and could direct the cops to that area. And sure enough, it was like within a day, or two, that they knocked on the door of the friend's house that I was staying at and took me away. I went into juvie again, and this time I was completely high on pills. The judge sent me to a facility that was about 3 hours away from where I lived. So the conditions at this place were absolutely terrible. The hygiene was awful. I broke out in this like crazy rash, diseased rash all over my face. My mom said it looked like I had shingles, but my face was like completely covered in this like rash thing. It was, I had been in some facilities, okay? And this was definitely one of the worst facilities I had ever been in. I thought, this is absolutely disgusting. And my mom came and visited me, drove the 6-hour round trip, and she fought to get me out of there because the conditions were just so awful. The judge ended up agreeing. He said that I had to go back to the academy, and he wanted me to get my GED. By this time, I get out of that facility and I come back home, and my relationship with my girlfriend has ended. I dabbled in same-sex relationships after that, but honestly, there just were not many girls who were being lesbians at that time. So I ended up getting back into relationships with boys. I ended up meeting another guy. He was so charismatic, so charming. I thought he was so handsome and funny. He had like this confidence about him that just drew people in. And looking back, I see things very differently now, but at the time I was just so captivated by him. What I thought was going to be the beginning of a relationship with this amazing, funny guy was actually setting the stage for some of the most painful years I would ever experience in my life. So we will call him X. I finished my GED at the academy in February 2009. It was 1 month after I turned 17. My mom was done fighting with me at this point. I think she just really let go, and she just kind of let me do what I was going to do anyways. Because I was going to the academy, I met a bunch of friends there, and now we're all like 16, 17, 18, these friends, and everyone's driving. And so people are coming to pick me up now, and I'm going to hang out with them. And I remember my mom saying, like, I don't want you to go and do this, but I know you're going to do what you're going to do anyways. And I'm just really done fighting with you. And I remember being like, yeah, you know what? Like, you're right. I'm going to go. I would go and hang out with these friends. We were going partying, doing drugs. We all live very sexually active lifestyles. At this point, I had been seeing X now for about 2 months. And I remember my ex-girlfriend, because we actually stayed friends, and she called me and she was like, hey, I just had a dream about you last night, and in my dream you were pregnant. And I was like, what? That's so crazy. And didn't really think anything of it. But later, my friend had invited me to New Mexico on a family trip. She got to invite a friend, and so she invited me, and I went with her. And I remember the whole drive, I felt so completely nauseous. I was sick to my stomach. And she was like, I think we should take a pregnancy test. And so we find a local like gas station in New Mexico. We take the test, and sure enough, it comes back positive. I went to call my mom, and I said, hey, I have something to tell you. And she was like, let me guess, you're pregnant. And I was like, yeah, I am. She found a doctor for me right away when I came home, and X and I started spending all of our time together. I was introduced to his family. I introduced him to my family. And I remember we hung out like every single weekend. And I remember being in his town one weekend and there being this girl who was like, you don't want to date him. He hits women. I've seen him fight his mom. He fought a teacher. That's why he went to the academy. You do not want to get messed up with this guy. Of course, because I don't listen to any warnings and I don't fear anything, I don't listen to her. I don't heed her advice. Meanwhile, my mom is helping me get enrolled in community college, and I'm going to go to college and try to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. Now that I'm out of school, I'm pregnant, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. So I enroll in community college and I get enough money and grants to buy a car and get an apartment. For some reason, they think that I'm 18 and they let me sign the papers and I get the apartment. And X moves in with me. And this is where all of the abuse starts. And you know what? It started so fast and it escalated so quickly that I can't even recall the first time it happened. I just know that it wasn't ever not happening. The police were called multiple times. My friends would call the police because he would do this stuff in front of them, just hit me and we would fight. And I remember just every single time letting him back in. His mom would bail him out. She would bring him back to the apartment where I was. And every time I just let him back in because I thought, you know what? We're having a baby. We'll figure this out. We're going to work through this. Around this same time, my parents ended up getting a divorce and my mom moved out of my dad's house and got her own place to live. Up until this point, I really hadn't thought about God that much. But I remember specifically praying a lot while I was pregnant with my baby because X and I would fight all of the time, and I was like always terrified that something was going to happen to the baby because he would knock me down, he would push me, he would hit me, and I would just lose control and we would just be fighting and I would have no ability, no self-control to stop it. And even if I tried to stop it, he had no self-control. And so he would just be coming at me until he, was done. I remember praying a lot. I would go and sit in a closet. And I remembered one time just crying and just praying that my baby was okay. And yeah, it was like a really hard thing to go through. I ended up going into labor with my son in February of 2010, a month after I turned 18. It was just a few weeks after my son was born. I remember X was standing over my bed with a knife in his hand. I was like, "What are you doing?" And he said, "A demon is telling me to kill you." And I was like, "Stop being ridiculous. You need to just go to sleep." Because I was so terrified that if I reacted or responded, I didn't know what he would actually do. And so I just pretended like nothing was happening and I rolled over and just tried to act as though this was not real life. And he ended up putting the knife down and getting into bed. And I remember in that moment feeling so terrified. I'm laying in bed and I'm looking across and my newborn son is right there and this demented guy is laying next to me telling me that a demon is telling him to kill me. This guy I was once intoxicated with, I was now in a nightmare with trying to figure out how do I get out of this? I end up losing the apartment because I dropped out of school that second semester. My dad came to help us move all of our stuff out of the apartment. And I remember as we were packing, X and I started fighting about something. He came over and he choked me out to the point where I was like unconscious on the floor. I remember like waking up and coming to, and he's just walking around the apartment like I'm not laying there unconscious on the floor. And I didn't want my dad to know what was going on, so I just pretended like nothing happened and just continued moving boxes. And we ended up moving out of that apartment and moving in with my mom at her new house. Moved in with my mom. He got into a fight. My mom came running in and like separated us, and she was like, "You need to go." He punched a hole in my mom's wall and he left, and my mom called the cops, and they came in, took pictures. I had marks all over me, and then I got a restraining order against him, so he couldn't come within a certain distance of me for a certain amount of time. And, I could go on and on about all of the abuse and all of the different stories, but, essentially that would go on for the next 3 years. The restraining order would get dropped. He would come back. He was in and out of jail all of the time. During this time, I would get different jobs to try to provide. And I remember getting this daycare job that was really good, but they ended up letting me go because I just wasn't a good fit for their team, which is totally fine because looking back, I probably was like, I had no self-awareness. So I probably did or said a lot of things that, made me not a good fit for their daycare. So they let me go, and a friend was like, "Hey, you should come to the strip club and work with me." And I was like, "Okay, well, yeah, I'll give it a try." And so I went with her one night, and I just saw how fast you could make money that I was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, like count me in. This is what's up." I ended up starting that. But before I did start it more permanently, I remember getting a call. It must have been just like a few days after I did like the trial night of dancing. I get this call, and it happened to be the parents of a kid that was in my class at the daycare. And this kid was so freaking cute. He was so sweet. His parents and I got along really well. They actually had me come babysit for them outside of school, but they found out that I was no longer working there anymore. And so they got my number and they called me and they asked if I would become his nanny because they wanted to get him out of the daycare and bring him home. And I was like thinking, I could do that, but now I have this other opportunity, and that's just gonna make me way more money, and I need money right now. And so I ended up telling them no. I was like, "You know what, sorry, but I can't, I'm doing something else." Obviously, looking back, I can totally see that that was God providing a way out, and again, I just did not take it. Because I hid that I was dancing at the club from X, and he was just getting more and more suspicious, he ended up sending in a friend to spy out if I was actually dancing or if I was a waitress, because he wasn't 21 and you had to be 21 to enter, but you could be 18 to dance. And so the friend comes in and I immediately know what's up. And I'm like, oh shoot, he is gonna find out. And so sure enough, he did. He ended up finding out, and it was such a mess. I ended up saving enough money to get us another apartment. So we were able to move out of his mom's house because my mom didn't want him back in her house, understandably so. And we lived with all of our parents. We lived with my mom, my dad, and his mom. And we just jumped around for like the first year of my son's life. I got us an apartment to move into, continued dancing. This lifestyle took a huge toll on me. I depleted very, very fast. I was doing stuff in the club that I just, didn't want to do, but got into it just because it's the nature of that lifestyle. You either tough it up and do the things or you get out. And I chose to tough it up. And I did a lot of things that just like really crushed my soul. And it caused me to start drinking almost every night I would go in. And thankfully, by the grace of God, I didn't end up dying or, hitting somebody because I'm driving home intoxicated now. I got myself caught up in really, really sketchy situations outside of all of like the sexual activity that you do in the club that is just so dangerous. I got into other really dangerous situations where one night I found myself leaving the club with my friend, and we were going with these guys, and they ended up taking us to another club, which I was so out of my mind, drunk, that I had no idea where we were. I didn't know where we were going. And I remember getting to our destination and just running to the bathroom because I was so dizzy. I couldn't see anything. And I just called the only number that comes to my mind because I can't remember anybody's phone number. And at that time you had to like remember people's phone numbers. And so I called the only number that came to my mind, which was my dad. And I'm like, Dad, I need you to come and get me, but I could not tell him where I was. I remember my friend coming in. I hung up the phone. My friend came into the bathroom. She handed me a cup, and I looked inside of it, and it had like crushed up pills. And she was like, "Here, drink this." And I was like, absolutely not. I am not drinking that. And it took me all night to sober up. And eventually, X and his mom, they came to get me from wherever I was. And I remember coming out and his mom's just yelling at me, "You whore," and saying all of this stuff to me. I'm like barely clothed. And we get into the car, and in the back seat, my son is buckled in his car seat. And I'm just looking at him like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? I tried to look into other things. I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to go to beauty school. I love doing hair. I love makeup. Let me get into Paul Mitchell Academy. And so I apply for that. I get in on some like scholarships and grants or whatever, and I'm still dancing to try and pay for that in the car and the apartment and everything that we have going on. The lifestyle was just so exhausting though, because I would have to be to the beauty school by like 8:00 in the morning, but I wouldn't even get out of dancing until like 3 a.m. on top of using drugs and living in just complete chaos. It was just unsustainable. The lifestyle was just completely unsustainable. I couldn't focus or concentrate on anything. Meanwhile, X's family is calling CPS on us, and we've got like CPS coming to our house and investigating because she's telling them I'm a dancer. The last time that X got arrested for assaulting me was my wake-up call. One night, X starts fighting with me. He's choking me out. And they hear the commotion and they call the police. They came in, they arrested him, they took the photos. And I remember the cops saying, "If you were my daughter, I would never let you see him again. And if you do not stop seeing him, he is going to kill you." And it was such a wake-up call for me because I knew he was right. So he was in jail for a few weeks after that. And I remember when he got out, he wanted to come back to the apartment, and I would not let him. I did not want him there. He stalked me. He tried to get in. He tried to force his way in. And I just knew, like, if I did not get out of this situation, he was never going to leave me alone. I had to leave the state. And my mom happened to get into a relationship after she divorced my dad, and she and her new boyfriend moved to Idaho. I remember telling her, like, I have to get out of here. She coordinated everything for me to get out of Texas and move to Idaho. She had a friend come bring a U-Haul and get all of my stuff out of my apartment. Looking back, like after I got saved, I remember thinking that was such a Moses and Pharaoh moment, because it was a miracle that X let me go, that he didn't like cause a scene or a fight or anything. And I remember telling him, I'm just going to go to Idaho, see how it is, and then I'll bring you up. Don't worry. I just need to go clear my head, get out of this situation. It was just a moment in time where I feel like God softened his heart for just a moment to get me out of that place. I show up in Idaho right before Halloween in 2011, and I feel so free. I honestly felt like a bird. That's like the best way that I could describe it, because I felt so free, like I could fly. I was on my own. I didn't have this guy harassing me. And it was just me and my son. And I just thought, like, life is going to change. I was completely wrong. After I got there, his calls started immediately, like, when are you bringing me out there? When am I coming? And when he realized that I had no intention of bringing him out there, he became furious. But he would continue making poor choices and continue getting himself locked up in Texas. I ended up getting a job shortly after arriving in Idaho through my mom. She found a job online for me at a call center. She applied for me and she did the phone interview, which got me to an in-person interview where they're asking me all of this stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, I totally did that, which I did none of it. And I ended up getting the job. I started that job in November of 2011. I started with a training class of like 16 other people. We would spend the next several weeks together, me and all these other people in my training class, and we just got to know each other really, really well. I remember Daniel was always talking to everybody about Jesus. When I first met him, he was actually involved in a fast through his church where he wasn't drinking or eating anything except V8s for like a week. And I just thought it was the strangest thing. But shortly after meeting some of the other girls, I got sucked into drugs and partying very fast. I started leaving my son at home with my mom. We started fighting again. I was hooking up with the wrong guys. Really just found myself realizing like, wait, I thought that I left Texas and everything was going to change, but everything has just followed me here. I realized like I was no longer in an abusive relationship, but I was just as much in bondage to all of these things and this lifestyle as I was in Texas. I'm not actually free. So I did the only thing I knew to do. I text my friend Daniel, who's telling everybody about Jesus, and I'm like, I know I need to change my life, and I know you know how. What do I need to do? Do I need to go to church? And he's like, you can go to church, but if you don't give your life to Jesus, then nothing is going to change for you. And I was like, in a text message, okay, Jesus, I give you control of my life. Now what? I was like, well, I guess I'll pick you up for church. Later on, I found out that he had met at his friend's house for a prayer night the night before I texted him that. And they were praying for me. He said, I know this girl at work and she has a son and she's completely out of control. We just need to pray for her. And they did. And the next day I texted him that. I was going to church now, and Daniel's still ministering to me. He and his friends started a Bible study just for me, and we were going through the book of Romans. But honestly, at the time, I was like, none of what y'all are saying makes any sense to me. I had no idea what they were going on about. But he and I became very close. Like, he became like a brother to me, and I confided in him for everything. I was telling him the guys that I was seeing. He would be such a big brother and mock me for the guys that I was dating. And I remember him telling me, like, you know, God wants all the same things that you want. He wants you to find a husband, and he wants your son to have a good dad, but you need to do it his way. You need to let him find that man for you and bring him into your life, because you don't know how to pick them. And I knew that he was right. I knew that that was true, but I just continued finding these guys and dating them. And I found one at church and got hooked up with him, and that was pretty toxic. He was not abusive, but I was abusive because all I knew was to fight in relationships. That I remember being at the park with him because, again, my two younger sisters who are much younger than me, I took them to the park and we were there, and he made me mad about something. And I remember I just hit him in public, and he was so shocked. He was like, what are you doing? Apparently, like, that's not normal. Shortly after this, my mom ends up kicking me out of her house. all of this is happening in such a short period of time. Remember, I got there in October. It's now around December or January. And a friend from work says that I can move in with he and his wife, that they had a spare bedroom and I can move in with them and I could stay there as long as I needed to. And so I did. I stayed there for a little while until I could save up money. And then I got another apartment. And by this time, I was 20 years old. My son was turning 2. For the next month or so, I just tried to go to church and read my Bible, but I'm still doing drugs, living in the world. The call center job is becoming like super exhausting to me, and I don't want to do it anymore. And so around the corner from the apartment that I moved into was a strip club. And I thought, oh, I'll just go back to stripping. Yes, because the money here is so bad. I go in and I try to start dancing there, but you had to be 21 to dance in Idaho, and I was not 21 yet. I went away discouraged and just feeling like, you know what, I just want to go back to Texas. I'm so sick of being here. Nothing is working out. I feel like all of the things followed me here. This Jesus guy is not working out for me. I call my friend Daniel and I tell him, you know, I'm going back to Texas. And he was like, you know what, you need to meet me at the coffee shop. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm already close. I'll meet you there. I sit down and he starts talking to me like, what's going on? And I'm like, dude, look, I tried your whole Jesus thing and it just didn't work out. And I'm just telling him all of my excuses, giving him all of my reasons, like everything I'm doing. He told me, because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, God wants to vomit you out of his mouth. And I just remember hearing that and immediately understanding. It was a supernatural experience that all of a sudden it flooded my mind that throughout my entire life, I had never surrendered my life to Jesus. Everything had always been about me, my desires, my plans, my ways. I didn't need better circumstances. I needed a savior. I needed somebody who could save me from myself. I walked into that coffee shop dead and I walked out alive. For the first time in my life, my desires changed. I broke up with that boyfriend. I stopped doing drugs. The convictions just started pouring out of my heart, and I wanted to do everything that God wanted me to do. In March of 2012, my car breaks down amidst all of this transformation stuff happening. Daniel had bought a house where he moved a bunch of different people into it. One of the girls lived there that we worked with. So he was like, you know what, I have a mechanic, come and stay at my house and you can just catch a ride with homegirl to work. And I was like, okay, cool. I do that, but while I'm there, I started hanging out with him a lot. I met his family and I just started falling for him. I saw the way that he treated my son and I was just so attracted to him because of that. I remember telling his sister-in-law, I think I have feelings for Daniel. And he was like, you know, he's going bald, right? And I was like, what? That is the strangest thing to say. After the fact, she would tell me that she said that because he had been hurt by some other girls and she didn't want to see him get hurt again. I totally understand, but it was the funniest thing. And now she's a part of our story forever because she said that to me. And so she goes and she tells Daniel, hey, you need to be careful because I'm living at his house. Courtney has feelings for you. And he's like, no, you don't have to worry about that. Trust me, like nothing is gonna happen there. She was like, no, like she told me. And he's like, what? Because it was just so crazy. We were like brother and sister. There was nothing in our relationship that was romantic at all whatsoever. He ends up coming to me and he's like, so I heard that this might be true. And I remember telling him like, yeah, it is. And he said, you know, you don't want to be with me. I'm going to be on a dirt floor somewhere serving in another country. And I'm like, you don't know what I want. God could change my heart. And so he's like, okay, let me go pray about it. And I just remember like going to the Lord and being like, you know what, God, you have to show me if this is from you, because I don't want to ruin this relationship. He is such a good friend to me. And this is the first guy I've ever had in my life, apart from my own brothers, who has treated me this way and who has not wanted anything from me but genuine friendship. I remember coming out of the room at his house, and it was a split level. So when you walk out into the hallway, you look down into the living room, and he's sitting on the couch, and I see him, and I just have this like moment of supernatural love like fill my body. It was the craziest thing. I just felt like love. That's the only thing that I could explain it as. And I just felt like it was God telling me, pursue this. Yes, this is what I have for you. And I was just like, okay. We end up talking about it, and he tells me, like, if we're going to do this, we're not going to date. We're not going to drag this out and have some long engagement or anything like that. We're just going to do it. And I was like, yeah, totally. I agree. And so we went back and forth. I guess you could consider that we dated for about 2 weeks. And then he proposed to me, and he said, let's get married. Let's go to the courthouse tomorrow. And so that's what we did. We woke up and we went to the courthouse the next day, and we got married on April 30th, the day after his birthday. It was such an exciting day. Here I am, a brand new Christian, and Daniel becomes a husband and a father all in one day. My son and I moved in with him, and we leased my apartment out to someone else. People would reach out to me and they would ask me, what happened to you? Like, you are so different now. And I had all of these opportunities to share the gospel with these people who knew me growing up, and seeing this like crazy transformation all happening online through Facebook. And I remember like every time someone came to mind that I felt like I had hurt, I would immediately reach out and apologize to them. That was like one of the defining markers of my life when I first became a Christian. I was like apologizing to everyone. I had so much repentance just in my heart that I apologized to my mom. I apologized to my sisters. I called people from Texas. I was apologizing to them. God was growing my morals. He was showing me what was right and wrong. He was giving me a new standard to live by. One of the things that stands out to me is in that first year of following him, he just showed me how faithful he was throughout my entire life. Like, the word grace meant so much to me in that first year. I remember getting this memory of being in Texas, and at the time, X was in jail, and I was just on my own trying to figure life out while he was locked up, and I had my son. My dad had told me that I needed to get an oil change on this car, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll try to figure that out. But I'm just like a helpless damsel out there. And God, he was showing up for me. He was my knight in shining armor every step of the way. I remember being at a stoplight and looking over and seeing a sign, and it literally read, "Single mom needs oil change, call this number." And I was like, oh, that's crazy. That's me. It's exactly what I need. Well, that's cool. And I drove off. I didn't call the number. I just drove off, and God brought that memory back to me, and he like showed me that was me providing for you. I had X and my anniversary tattooed on my wrist, and I remember really wanting to get it covered up. I just wanted that like part of my life to be completely gone. And so I was thinking, like, what kind of cover up am I going to get on my arm? I was reading the story of Abraham and Isaac, and I just loved how God provided the ram for Abraham in that moment. And he called that place, God will provide. And I thought, like, that is everything that God has done in my life. He provided me a way out of an extremely abusive relationship. He provided a plane ticket to Idaho. He provided the job in Idaho. He provided those friends who prayed for me. And then he provided the most amazing husband I could have ever asked for, wouldn't have even known to ask for, who loved my son and brought me to saving faith in Christ. He's just brought me through season after season after season. The thing that stands out to me the most is that Jesus didn't help me become a better person. He made me new. I walked into that coffee shop one way and I walked out a completely different person. Jesus tells Nicodemus that to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must be born again. For years, I heard Christian language. Like, I knew God was real. I knew that he existed, but that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to know that he existed. I needed a changed heart. I needed a transformed life. What no consequence was ever going to produce in me, Christ did. God opened my eyes and he showed me my need for him, and I surrendered. The Bible says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. And that is exactly what happened to me. Not everyone has an extreme testimony like me. I totally understand that not everybody goes to juvie, not everybody starts stripping up in the club, doing drugs, like all of those things. I totally get that. But everyone genuinely has to have a conversion from dark to light, from dead to life, from serving self to serving Christ. Everyone has to be involved in the miracle of being born again. We stop living according to our own authority and we follow Christ. If you claim to know Jesus and your life just does not look radically different from serving self to serving Christ, then I would definitely recommend that you wrestle with that. Because Christianity is not about adding church to your life or adding religious activity, becoming, a good person or slightly nicer than you were before. It's about being made new. And no amount of consequences could change my heart. No amount of counseling, programs, court orders, jail sentences, or discipline could make me love what is good. Only Jesus could do that. My mom wasn't going to save me. And that's why I share my story. Not because it's special or anything like that, but because Jesus is. And if he can save me, then he can save anybody. I am certain of that. Harder Knocks exists to encourage women to live out their spiritual lives and grow in maturity and follow Jesus with their whole heart and their whole life. That is what I hope to do now. Over the last 14 years, God has shaped me and molded me. He has provided for us in moves and losses and victories. We've experienced success, we've experienced failures, miscarriages. We've just walked through some really hard things that I would have never chosen for myself. But through it all, God has been faithful and he has faithfully shown up for me. And now I'm here to faithfully show up for you. So if this testimony resonates with you, then consider subscribing and I will see you in my next video.